Zoe, here's $50,000. Consider it the final payment for the 20 years our family raised you. From now on, you and the Sullivans are done. My adoptive mother, Laura, no, I should call her Mrs. Sullivan now, slammed a stack of cash on the gleaming coffee table. Her voice was like a scalpel, cold and sharp, precisely severing the last thread connecting me to this family. Beside her, my adoptive father, James Sullivan, chairman of the Sullivan Group, sat stiffly, not even bothering to look at me. He just glanced impatiently at his Patek Philippe. Laura, hurry up and deal with this. I have a meeting at 3. Deal with this. What a perfect choice of words. I was like an outdated designer knockoff, mercilessly tossed aside as trash now that the real deal had arrived. And that real deal, the Sullivans' true heiress, Wendy, was nestled against Laura's side. Her eyes were swollen and red like ripe peaches, but the look she gave me was laced with the venom of victory. Sister, oh no, Zoe, she corrected herself, covering her mouth with a fake gasp. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's just so unfair. You stole 20 years of my life, lived in my room, spent my parents' money, and wore my pretty dresses. Now it's time for you to give it all back. She sobbed dramatically as if she were the world's greatest victim. I stood in the center of the living room, the cold marble chilling my feet. I was still in the school uniform I'd worn home yesterday. My luggage, a single shabby suitcase, had been tossed by the door like garbage by the butler. Watching this touching family reunion drama unfold, I almost laughed out loud. Stole her life? So naive. Adorably naive. She thought she was returning to a paradise, a warm haven filled with parental love. She thought from now on, she'd be a pampered princess, wanting for nothing. But she had no idea that for a couple like James and Laura Sullivan, the word family wasn't even in their vocabulary. Their hearts were cold, hard abacuses, every click a calculation of profit and loss. They adopted me not out of kindness, but because some master told them they were fated to have a daughter who would boost their fortune. So, they picked me out of an orphanage like a head of cabbage. Over the years, the Sullivan Group did indeed have smooth sailing, growing from a small local business into a publicly traded company worth billions. They credited it all to my good luck. So they gave me the best education, had me learn equestrianism, piano, and finance, molding me into the perfect family mascot, a social tool that could bring them even greater benefits. As for love, don't make me laugh. The number of times James spoke to me in a year, I could count on 2 hands. Laura's greatest daily pleasure was to scrutinize me with a critical eye, ensuring that this product had no flaws. When I got first place on an exam, their reaction was, "Good. Keep it up. Don't embarrass the Sullivan family." When I won a gold medal in a piano competition, their reaction was, "Not bad. You'll perform this at next month's charity gala." I honestly doubt they even knew my blood type or my birthday. Now their biological daughter was back. In their eyes, a real daughter's fortune-boosting powers were surely stronger than those of an adopted one. So it was only natural that this old, used tool was due to be discarded. Give it back to you? All right. I finally spoke, my voice as calm as still water. I walked over to the coffee table and picked up the $50,000. Then, in front of all of them, I began to count it, slow and deliberate. 1 bill, 2 bills, 3. James's brow furrowed. What are you doing? Is it not enough? Wendy chimed in with a scornful tone. Zoe, don't be ungrateful. $50,000 is enough for someone like you to live on for years. I ignored them and kept counting. After finishing, I looked up, a bright, almost eerie smile on my face. Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Sullivan. I was just confirming the amount. I waved the cash in my hand. $50,000 to buy out 20 years of my good luck charm services. That's an average of $2,500 a year, less than $7 a day. Honestly, that's cheaper than hiring a cleaning lady. The Sullivan family really has cost-effectiveness engraved in its bones. Laura's face instantly turned beet red. You ungrateful snake. We raised you for all these years for free, and you dare to stand there and make sarcastic remarks. For free? My smile widened. Are you sure, Mrs. Sullivan? When I was 13, I was helping you with those overseas fund reports you couldn't understand. At 15, I was the one who pulled 3 all-nighters to find the tax loophole that nearly sent Mr. Sullivan to prison. And on my 18th birthday, I didn't have a party. I was in the study, writing a nearly flawless acquisition proposal for the Sullivan Group that earned you a net profit of $300 million. I paused, scanning their shocked, stunned faces, and said word for word, "Did you really think the Sullivan Group got to where it is today all because of some imaginary good fortune? You're wrong. It was because of me, Zoe. Because of the knockoff. You never gave a second thought." James's face went from ashen to ghostly white. His lips trembled, unable to form a single word. Wendy was even more dumbfounded. She probably never imagined that the nerd she saw as nothing but a bookworm had this side to her. I folded the $50,000 neatly and put it in my school uniform pocket. "I'll take this money. Not as a final payment, but as a severance package." I looked at James, a hint of pity in my smile. "After all, your company's most essential employee just resigned today." With that, I didn't give them another glance. I turned, walked to the door, and picked up my suitcase. "Wait." James finally snapped out of it. He shot up from the sofa, his voice tinged with a panic he didn't even recognize. "What did you mean just now? What tax loophole? What acquisition proposal?" I stopped but didn't turn back. "It means, Mr. Sullivan, that your good days are over." I pulled open the heavy door, and the sunlight outside was blinding. Behind me, I could hear Wendy's shrill cries and Laura's furious curses. But in my heart, there was a sense of peace I had never felt before. Goodbye, Sullivan family. And goodbye to my ridiculous and laughable 20-year career as a tool. I walked out of the gated community, pulled out my phone, and expertly deleted the only 2 family contacts in my address book. Then, I dialed a number that had long been dormant, but was etched into my brain. The call was answered on the first ring. An excited, trembling, and elderly yet authoritative male voice came from the other end. "Hello. Is this Zoe?" My eyes instantly turned red. In that single moment, 20 years of pretense, of forced strength, crumbled upon hearing that name. I took a deep breath, swallowed the lump in my throat, and with all my might, I said softly, "Grandpa, I'm coming home." On the other end of the line was my biological grandfather, Arthur Lynn, a legendary figure who could make the global financial markets tremble with a stomp of his foot. The Lynns were a truly hidden, powerful family. So low-key you couldn't find their name on any global rich list. Yet 7 of the world's top 10 billionaires owed the Lynn family a favor. The Sullivans' pathetic assets weren't even a rounding error to the Lynns. 20 years ago, my parents took me to an overseas banquet where we were caught in a carefully orchestrated attack. In the chaos, I was separated from them by the crowd. By the time they found their way back to where I'd been, I was gone. They searched for me for 20 whole years. And I, a child with memories only from the age of 3, was sent to an orphanage and then adopted by the Sullivans. I wasn't without suspicions about my origins. Ever since I could remember, my mind held fragmented memories that didn't belong to a normal child, complex financial models, snippets of daily conversations in multiple languages, and the face of a kind old man who always called me Zoe. As I grew older, these memory fragments became clearer. I began to use the resources the Sullivans provided to secretly investigate my own past. I was like a hacker lurking in the deep sea, searching through an ocean of data for the thread that connected me to my past. Finally, a year ago, I found it. I found the Lynn family and confirmed my identity. But I didn't go back right away, because I'd discovered a much more interesting game. The Sullivan family, who had treated me as a tool, was running a company with chaotic internal management and financial statements riddled with loopholes. It was like a beautiful apple, shiny on the outside but eaten hollow by worms on the inside. I felt that just leaving would be letting them off too easily. So I stayed. While playing the part of the obedient and sensible adoptive daughter, I quietly copied all of the Sullivan Group's core data, trade secrets, and records of their shady, under-the-table dealings onto my private server. My original plan was to wait another 2 years until I graduated from college, then find the right moment to give them a special gift. I didn't expect Wendy's arrival to move up the timeline. Just as well. It saves me from having to act in their little play any longer. Less than 10 minutes after I hung up with my grandfather, a Rolls-Royce, inconspicuous in its design but instantly recognizable to the discerning eye as a top-of-the-line, custom-built armored vehicle, pulled up silently in front of me. The door opened, and an old butler with white hair, yet full of vigor and dressed in a well-tailored formal suit, hurried out. "Miss." The moment he saw me, his eyes reddened, and his voice choked with emotion. "Alfred, Alfred is finally seeing you again." Alfred, the old butler from my fragmented memories who was always giving me candy. I smiled at him. "Alfred, I've missed you." Once inside the car, I was enveloped in a climate-controlled comfort and the faint scent of sandalwood. Alfred sat in the front passenger seat, constantly looking at me in the rearview mirror, muttering, "Miss, these past 20 years you've suffered." I shook my head. It wasn't suffering. Let's just say I was experiencing life in the countryside. Alfred paused for a moment, then gave a wry smile. He knew my personality. I'd been mischievous since I was a child. "The old master, and your father and mother, are all waiting for you at the estate. They've been nearly driven mad with worry." The car drove smoothly toward the suburbs, passed through a dense, primeval forest that was clearly worth a fortune, and finally stopped in front of a classic and elegant Chinese-style manor. The large vermilion gates slowly opened to reveal 3 people standing at the entrance. In the lead was my grandfather, Arthur Lynn, standing tall and straight, leaning on a dragon-headed cane. Behind him stood a middle-aged couple. The man was refined and handsome, the woman gentle and beautiful. Time seemed to have been especially kind to them, leaving few traces on their faces. They were my biological parents, Richard and Claire Lynn. The moment I stepped out of the car, my mother, Claire, could no longer hold back. She covered her mouth, and tears fell like broken strings of pearls. My father, Richard, supported her, his own eyes red, his gaze filled with the ecstatic joy of having me back and a deep sense of guilt. My grandfather walked forward, his old, trembling hand reaching out to touch my cheek. "You're back, it's good that you're back." Looking at them, 20 years of hurt and loneliness seemed to find an outlet at that moment. I couldn't hold it together anymore. I threw myself into my grandfather's arms and sobbed. They weren't tears of sadness, but tears of coming home. That night, the Lynn family estate was ablaze with lights. My mom, Claire, personally cooked a huge feast of all my childhood favorite dishes. My dad and grandpa acted like 2 old kids, constantly piling food onto my plate, afraid I would go hungry. At the dinner table, they tiptoed around the subject of the Sullivans, afraid of touching a raw nerve. It was I who brought it up. "Dad, Mom, Grandpa, don't worry about the Sullivans. I can handle it myself," I said calmly, putting down my chopsticks. My dad, Richard, frowned. "Zoe, those clowns aren't worth you getting your hands dirty. Just tell Dad, do you want them bankrupt by tomorrow, or the day after?" See, that's my dad's brand of dominance. I smiled. "No, Dad. That would be letting them off too easily." I laid out my plan, including all the dirt I had on the Sullivan group. After hearing me out, my dad and grandpa exchanged a look, their eyes filled with approval and a hint of heartache. "That's my granddaughter." Grandpa slapped his thigh. "Brave and brilliant. That pack of fools at the Sullivan family treated you like a tool, never knowing they'd brought home a goddess who could blow them sky high." But my mom, Claire, took my hand, her voice full of pain. "Zoe, you've been through so much. You shouldn't have to think about these dirty, rotten things anymore. Mom doesn't want you to have to deal with this." I shook my head, my gaze firm. "Mom, this isn't dirty and rotten. This is my final project. I want them to know exactly what they threw away. I want to watch that so-called empire they built crumble to dust before my very eyes. I want them to pay the most painful price for their stupidity and snobbery." My tone was calm, but the chill in it seemed to lower the temperature of the entire dining room. Richard looked at me, silent for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Richard, Lynn's daughter, can do whatever she wants." He handed me a black card. "This is the Lynn family's unlimited black card. No credit limit. The pin is your birthday." He paused, then added, "All of the Lynn family's resources are at your disposal. If you need Dad to do anything, just say the word." I took the card, a warmth spreading through my chest. This is what family is. Not using you for good luck, not treating you as a tool, but unconditionally supporting you, believing in you, and being your strongest pillar of support. Just then my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, and Wendy's shrill, sharp voice came through. "Zoe, you jinx. Did you go and find some sugar daddy? Let me tell you, don't get too cocky. Tomorrow is the Sullivan Group's 30th anniversary celebration, and my dad said he's saving an invitation for you. He wants you to come and see what real high society looks like. Oh, is that so? A cold smile touched my lips. An anniversary celebration? Perfect. My final project exhibition was in need of an opening ceremony. Tell Mr. Sullivan I'll be there on time. After hanging up, I looked at my parents and grandpa. Dadma, tomorrow, can I borrow your style team? My mom Claire lit up immediately. Of course. I'll have the global chief designers from Dior and Chanel fly over right away. My daughter must be the most dazzling princess at the party. I smiled. No, I'm not going to be a princess. I'm going to crash the party. The Sullivan Group's 30th anniversary celebration was held at the city's most luxurious 7-star hotel. The venue was filled with a glittering crowd of socialites, a sea of fine clothes and clinking champagne glasses. James and Laura Sullivan moved through the guests, their faces beaming. Wendy, dressed in a haute couture princess gown, was like a proud peacock, basking in the praise and envy of the crowd. Wendy is getting more beautiful by the day. Just as expected of Chairman Sullivan's real daughter, her aura is just different. Yes, I hear Wendy even studied at a top business school abroad. She's sure to inherit her father's mantle in the future. Wendy listened to these compliments, her chin held even higher. She scanned the room triumphantly, as if searching for something. The moment my escort and I appeared at the entrance of the ballroom, the entire hall fell silent, as if someone had hit a pause button. Every eye in the room turned to us. Tonight, I wore a black velvet gown that was simple in appearance, but full of subtle artistry. It was hand-sewn by a legendary French designer, its cut perfectly outlining my figure. My makeup, done by my mother's personal artist, was exquisite and sharp, sweeping away any trace of my former student self. Around my neck was a diamond necklace, its centerpiece the Star of Lynn, a priceless pink diamond my grandfather had given me as a welcome home gift. Its value could probably buy the Sullivan Group 10 times over. And my escort for the evening was my father, Richard Lynn. He had traded his usual refined attire for a high-end custom suit, his powerful presence on full display. The aura of authority and calm that came from being a long-time leader made every self-proclaimed elite man in the room pale in comparison. When James and Laura saw me, the smiles on their faces froze instantly. Their eyes were filled with shock, jealousy, and a hint of indescribable anger. Wendy was so jealous her eyes looked like they might shoot fire. She stared at the necklace around my neck, then at the distinguished Richard by my side, the malice in her gaze almost tangible. Zoe. She strode over, her voice sharp. Where did you find this sugar daddy? And dressed like that? You think you can put on a crown and be a queen? Aren't those fake glass beads around your neck bothering you? She thought my dad was my sponsor. Before I could speak, Richard frowned slightly. He didn't even glance at Wendy, simply saying to me in a low voice, Zoe, the air in here isn't very good. Too many flies. His dismissive tone, and the contempt that came from his very bones were more cutting than any vicious insult. Wendy's face turned beet red. Just then, James and Laura walked over. James, suppressing his rage, put on the air of an elder and said with a smirk, Zoe, you're really something else now. You know how to find a backer. But young people should have some self-respect. Don't do just anything for a bit of money. Laura added with a sneer, exactly. And you, sir, you should be careful. Some people are just born ungrateful snakes, you can't tame them. They thought my dad was some rich sucker I had duped. Their stupidity was almost laughable. My dad's face darkened. If I hadn't briefed him beforehand, James Sullivan might already be flying out the window. I linked my arm with my dad's, giving him a reassuring smile, then turned to the Sullivans. Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Sullivan. Thank you for your concern, I said with a smile. But you don't need to worry about my private life. I'm here for the celebration tonight, not to be lectured. With that, I pulled my dad along and walked straight to the main table at the front of the ballroom. James was trembling with rage, but he was powerless to do anything about it, forced to watch as we became the center of attention. Halfway through the banquet, it was time for the Sullivan Group's achievement presentation. A huge LED screen began to play a slickly produced promotional video. In it, James Sullivan spoke with passion about the Sullivan Group's glorious 30-year history, painting the company as a responsible and reputable enterprise. The guests nodded in approval, their applause thundering. James stood on stage, flush with pride. He raised his glass and declared, "In the future, the Sullivan Group will continue to uphold the principle of integrity, creating even greater value for society. I announce that our next multi-billion-dollar project, City of the Future, is now officially launched." Another round of enthusiastic applause erupted from below the stage. Wendy stood beside him, her face glowing with pride. I sat in my seat, took a slow sip of champagne, then pulled out my phone and hit send. The next second, the massive LED screen on the stage flickered. The grand blueprint for the City of the Future instantly switched to a crystal-clear engineering materials inspection report. On the report, several glaring red headlines were impossible to miss. Construction steel rebar, sample inspection failed, strength 30% below national standard. Concrete samples mixed with large quantities of sea sand, posing a severe safety risk. Fire safety equipment and materials are all counterfeit and substandard products. The entire hall fell dead silent. Everyone stared, dumbfounded, at the report on the screen. The report was signed off by the Sullivan Group's Internal Quality Inspection Department, and it even bore James Sullivan's personal signature. This was from the internal files of their most recently completed and delivered residential project. The blood drained from James's face in an instant. He stood frozen on stage as if struck by lightning, his mouth agape, wide enough to fit an egg. "No, this isn't real. It's a fake. It's photoshopped," he shrieked, his voice sharp and piercing with fear. The technicians scrambled to switch the display, but no matter what they did, the report on the screen was stuck, as if it had been welded there. Then the screen changed again. This time it was a series of shocking chat logs. It was a conversation between James and his material suppliers, the content all about how to use shoddy materials, cut corners, and maximize profits. "Zhang, get me a cheaper price on that batch of rebar. The strength just needs to be passable. Once the building is up, no one will see it anyway. Sea sand is fine, it's cheap. We'll deal with any problems if they come up. Fire safety? That stuff is just for show. Save money where we can." The evidence was irrefutable. The faces of the guests in the audience changed dramatically. Those who had just bought apartments in that Sullivan Group project turned pale, their eyes filled with fear and fury. My God, James Sullivan is this kind of person. My apartment. The apartment I spent my life savings on is a death trap. Unscrupulous scumbag. Give me my money back. The scene instantly descended into chaos. Angry homeowners rushed the stage, while reporters' camera flashes went off like a frenzy of lightning, capturing the image of James's face, twisted by terror and despair. Laura and Wendy were already paralyzed with fear, slumped on the floor, trembling. And me? I just sat quietly in the corner and finished the last sip of my champagne. I watched the ridiculous and pathetic farce unfold on stage, a satisfied smile on my face. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan. Surprised? This is just the appetizer. My final project exhibition has only just begun. The surprise at the celebration was like a blockbuster bomb, leaving the Sullivan Group and the Sullivan family completely fried. The next day, news of the Sullivan Group cutting corners and building death trap apartments plastered the front pages of every media outlet. The company's stock price plummeted, hitting its daily limit down within 10 minutes of the market opening. Furious homeowners blocked the entrance to the Sullivan Group headquarters, holding banners and chanting, "Scumbag James Sullivan, give us back our hard-earned money." Debt collection calls from banks and contract termination letters from partners flew onto James's desk like an avalanche. Overnight, the Sullivan family went from an enviable high society name to social pariahs. I sat leisurely in the courtyard of the Lynn family estate, sipping premium oolong tea that Alfred had brewed, scrolling through the news on my phone, and feeling absolutely wonderful. My dad, Richard, walked over and handed me a brand new laptop. "Zoe, I had the tech department custom build this for you. Top specs in the world. Its processing speed is faster than a supercomputer. This should be easier for you to work with." My eyes lit up. "Thanks, Dad." I opened the laptop, my fingers flying across the keyboard as lines of code streamed across the screen. Richard watched me, his eyes filled with both admiration and a bit of curiosity. Zoe, I've always wondered, where did you learn all these computer skills? Without looking up, I said casually, oh, self-taught. I was bored locked up in my room all those years at the Sullivans, so I just read some books and wrote some code. James's company firewall was terrible, so I helped him beef it up a bit, and whoops, I accidentally got administrator privileges. Richard was speechless. He fell silent. He was probably wondering what good karma James Sullivan had accumulated to have hired a powerhouse like me to experience life at his house. How are things on the Sullivan side now? Richard smiled, a hint of almost imperceptible contempt in it. What else? They're drowning at each other's throats. Just as my dad said, the Sullivan house was in total chaos. James was taking out all his anger on Laura and Wendy. This is all your fault. If you hadn't kicked that jinx Zoe out, would any of this have happened? He raged at home, smashing a set of antique vases that Laura cherished. Laura, not one to back down, screamed back, James Sullivan. You have the nerve to blame me? If you hadn't been cutting corners and doing shady business deals, would Zoe have had anything on you? Now that things have gone south, you're pushing all the blame onto your wife and daughter? Are you even a man? Wendy just sobbed in the corner. Dad, Mom, please stop fighting. It's all my fault, it's all my fault. The more she cried, the more irritated James became. Cry, cry, cry. That's all you know how to do. What else can you do? I spent all that money sending you to study abroad, and what did you learn? The company is in a massive crisis, and you can't even come up with a single idea. Compared to Zoe, you're absolutely useless. The word useless stung Wendy's pride like a needle. She shot her head up and screamed at James, I'm useless? What about you? You were played like a fiddle by that bitch Zoe, and you have the nerve to call me useless. If you're so great, why don't you go get revenge on her? Slap. A sharp smack echoed as he slapped Wendy across the face. James was trembling with rage, pointing at her and yelling, How dare you talk to me like that? You've gone too far. Wendy clutched her face, looking at him in disbelief. This was the first time James had ever hit her. The admiration and worship in her eyes shattered instantly, replaced by resentment and coldness. Once a crack appears in a family, it can never be repaired. And I was going to be the one to take a hammer and smash that crack even wider. I tapped a key on my keyboard. An anonymous email was sent silently to Laura's private inbox. The email contained no text, only a few photos. The photos showed James with a young, glamorous woman and a little boy about 5 or 6 years old. The three of them were at an amusement park, smiling happily, looking for all the world like a perfect, happy family. The background of the photo was a kindergarten named Little Sunshine. With that done, I closed my laptop and stretched. All right, the first landmine has been planted. Now, it's time to sit back and watch the show. My dad, Richard, had been watching me the whole time. When I finished, he asked Zoe, Is there anything I need to do? I shook my head and gave him a sly smile. Dad, don't use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I can handle a small scene like this myself. But I might need an assistant. Oh, what kind of assistant? Someone who can help me fan the flames. I picked up my phone and dialed another number. The owner of this number was Ethan Cole, a man known on Wall Street as a financial genius. He was also the mastermind behind Starlight Capital, the Sullivan Group's biggest competitor. Rumor had it, he had a personal vendetta against James Sullivan. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. The call connected, and a lazy yet magnetic male voice came through. Hello? Mr. Cole, hello. This is Zoe Lynn. There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by a soft chuckle. Ms. Lynn? A rare pleasure. So, did you enjoy the Sullivan Group's anniversary celebration? It seemed he already knew about my masterpiece. It was all right. Just an appetizer, I said coolly. I'm calling to ask if you, Mr. Cole, would be interested in collaborating on something bigger? Ethan seemed very interested. Oh, I'm listening. I want the Sullivan Group to completely disappear from the face of the earth. Another silence on the line. After a long moment, Ethan's voice returned, tinged with excitement and amusement. Ms. Lynn, you continue to surprise me. I'm very interested in your proposal. A pleasure doing business with you. A pleasure. Hanging up the phone. The smile on my face grew wider. James, Laura, Wendy. Are you ready? The real show is just about to begin. Laura opened the anonymous email late one night, tossing and turning in her bed. When she saw the photo of James holding that little boy, beaming with fatherly love, her world collapsed. Married for 30 years, she had always believed she was James's only woman, the rightful mistress of the Sullivan household. She had borne him children, even if the daughter was fake, managed the household for him, and handled everything behind the scenes. And for what? He not only had another woman on the side, but he had a son who was already this old. Rage, jealousy, and a sense of betrayal consumed her reason like a venomous snake. She didn't storm into the study to confront James like a shrew. Years of high society life had taught her one thing. Impulsiveness is the devil, and confrontations without proof would only put her at a disadvantage. She forced herself to calm down. She looked at the background of the photo, Little Sunshine Kindergarten. A plan began to form in her mind. The next day, for the first time in ages, Laura didn't go to her usual beauty salon. Instead, she changed into inconspicuous clothes, put on sunglasses and a mask, and drove a plain family car to the Little Sunshine Kindergarten. She waited in the car for the entire afternoon. Finally, when school let out, she saw her. She saw the woman from the photo, driving a red Porsche, picking up the little boy. Laura's eyes instantly turned bloodshot. That Porsche was a limited edition. James had mentioned it to her recently, saying a friend wanted to buy it, but he couldn't part with it. So he wasn't reluctant to sell it, he had bought it for this mistress. Laura slammed on the gas and followed them. She tailed the red Porsche all the way to a high-end villa complex. She was very familiar with this place. It was another one of the Sullivan Group's developments, known for its privacy. Watching the woman and child walk into one of the villas, Laura's heart sank to the bottom of a pit. Keeping a mistress in a love nest. Well played, James. Well played. She didn't rush in immediately. Instead, she took out her phone and frantically took pictures of the villa's entrance. Then she made a call. Hello, is this Mr. Davis? This is Laura Sullivan. I want a divorce. I want to divorce that bastard James Sullivan. And I want him to leave with nothing. Meanwhile, James was completely oblivious. He was still at the office, drowning in the death trap apartment crisis. He had no idea that a fire he couldn't possibly extinguish was already raging in his own backyard. And I, the one who lit the match, was sitting in a stylish private club with my new ally, Ethan Cole. Ethan Cole. True to his name, he was devastatingly handsome. An impeccably sharp face, with deep-set, captivating eyes behind gold-rimmed glasses that always seemed to hold a hint of a smile and a whole lot of calculation. He swirled the red wine in his glass, watching me with great interest. Ms. Lynn, I never took you for a master of palace intrigue. That was a beautifully played move, killing with a borrowed knife. He was clearly aware of Laura's actions. I shrugged. You're too kind. You have to use the right methods for the right people. So what's your next move? He asked. Pull the rug out from under them, I said succinctly. The Sullivan Group's biggest problem right now is a broken capital chain. As long as we can cut off all his financing channels and torpedo that so-called City of the Future project, he's finished. Ethan nodded in agreement. The financing is easy, he said. I've already had a word with the major banks. It would be easier for James Sullivan to climb to the moon than to borrow a single penny from them now. As for the City of the Future, he smiled. I heard that the core technology for that project is held by a German company. And that company, if I'm not mistaken, is a subsidiary controlled by the Lynn Group. I raised an eyebrow. Mr. Cole, your information is impressively up to date. Likewise. Ethan raised his glass. To our successful partnership. I clinked my glass against his. To our partnership. The next day, James Sullivan received two devastating pieces of news. First, his applications for emergency loans from all major banks were rejected. The reason given: the Sullivan Group's reputation was bankrupt, and the risk was too high. Second, the German tech company unilaterally announced the termination of all cooperation with the Sullivan Group. And due to the Sullivan Group's credibility issues, they were demanding a colossal, 10-figure penalty for breach of contract. The City of the Future project was dead in the water before it even began. When James got the call, his vision went black, and he nearly fainted on the spot. He knew someone was behind this, pulling the strings. And this person's power was beyond his wildest imagination. His first suspect was me. He called me frantically, but my number had long been blocked. His only option was to call Wendy and have her relay a message. You tell that little bitch Zoe to just wait. Even if I die, I'll drag her to hell with me. Wendy relayed the message to me, her voice trembling. I just found it amusing. Drag me to hell? Is he even worthy? I hung up and sent a message to Ethan. We can proceed to the next step. Ethan replied instantly, received. Let the show begin. The so-called next step was to package up all of James Sullivan's illegal activities over the years and deliver them to the relevant authorities. Tax evasion, commercial bribery, stock market manipulation. Each charge was enough to keep him in prison for the rest of his life. After all that, I felt a little bored. James's defeat was a foregone conclusion. This opponent was even weaker than I had imagined. I was just thinking about finding something else fun to do when my mom, Claire, ran over excitedly. Zoe, look, these are the potential husbands I've found for you. Every single one is a rising star, family background, character, looks, all top tier. See if you like any of them. She handed me a thick stack of photos. I was speechless. Mom, have you forgotten? Your daughter just turned 20. I was about to make an excuse to slip away when my eyes caught a familiar face. Ethan Cole. He was wearing a white suit, standing in a sea of flowers, smiling like some otherworldly demon. Below the photo was his bio. Age 28. Family, founder of Starlight Capital, family background mysterious. Hobbies, making money and watching people make fools of themselves. I burst out laughing. That was a rather unique hobby. I picked up Ethan's photo and said to my mom, Mom, I'll take him. Claire's eyes lit up. Really? Zoe, you like this type? Mom will arrange for you two to meet right away. Looking at the slyly smiling face in the photo, I suddenly felt that the days ahead might not be so boring after all. My mother's efficiency was rocket-like. The day after I gave her the nod, a grand accidental meeting was arranged. The location was a private equestrian club owned by my family. I was dressed in a sharp riding outfit, galloping freely across the field on my beloved horse, Lightning. That's when Ethan appeared. He had swapped his usual suit and tie for a matching riding outfit, mounted on a magnificent Fergana horse, slowly approaching me. Under the sun, he seemed to glow. Ms. Lynn. He reined in his horse, stopping in front of me with that familiar, playful smile on his lips. What a coincidence. I rolled my eyes. Coincidence? You can believe that if you want. I certainly don't. Mr. Cole, I greeted him lazily. You ride too? I do, he said with a straight face. I heard Ms. Lynn's equestrian skills are superb, so I came to seek some pointers. Looking at his pretentious act, I suddenly felt the urge to tease him. All right, I said, flicking my riding crop and looking at him provocatively. How about a race? I'd be happy to oblige. With a single command, our two horses shot forward like arrows released from a bow. The wind whistled past my ears, and I reveled in the thrill of the speed, my spirits soaring. Ethan's riding skills were, admittedly, not bad. He stayed close behind me, never too far, never too close. Just before the finish line, I deliberately slowed down. He instantly overtook me. Just as he thought he was about to win, I squeezed my legs against Lightning's sides. The horse understood perfectly, surged forward with a burst of speed, and crossed the finish line first by a nose. I reined in my horse and looked at him smugly. Mr. Cole, you let me win. Ethan looked at me, his eyes showing no annoyance at losing, but rather full of admiration and amusement. Ms. Lynn, you truly live up to your reputation, he said, dismounting and extending a hand to me. I lost. Name your price. I looked at his outstretched hand and dismounted as well. It's simple, I said. Tonight, you're buying me dinner. He paused for a second, then broke into a laugh, his captivating eyes seeming to hold a galaxy of stars. It would be my honor. Just then, a discordant voice shattered the lovely atmosphere. Ethan. Wendy popped up from out of nowhere, running toward Ethan with a look of pleasant surprise. She was also wearing a riding outfit, but the tight clothes only accentuated the extra weight she had put on from stress eating, squeezing her in all the wrong places. She ran up to Ethan, trying to affectionately link her arm with his. "Ethan, you're here too. What a coincidence." Ethan smoothly took a step back, avoiding her touch, his brow furrowing almost imperceptibly. "Miss Sullivan." His voice turned instantly cold. "Are we that familiar?" Wendy's smile froze on her face. She probably hadn't expected Ethan to be so cold to her. After all, at various banquets in the past, while Ethan was polite to everyone, he at least maintained a facade of courtesy. She wouldn't give up and turned her attack on me. "Zoe, what are you doing here? And with Ethan?" Her gaze was like a poisoned dagger, viciously scraping at me. "You shameless homewrecker. You just got kicked out by the Sullivans, and now you're already seducing Ethan." Before I could say a word, Ethan's face had completely darkened. "Miss Sullivan," he said, staring coldly at Wendy, the chill in his eyes almost palpable enough to freeze her. "Please watch your words. Zoe is my friend." "Friend?" Wendy scoffed as if she'd heard the world's biggest joke. "What kind of friend?" "A friend with benefits, I bet." Slap. A crisp slap echoed across the stables. But the one who struck was neither me nor Ethan. It was Laura. She had appeared at some point, followed by several menacing bodyguards. She rushed over, grabbed Wendy by the hair, and slapped her hard across the face, again and again. "I'll teach you to run your mouth. I'll teach you to spout nonsense. You little bitch. You're just like your father, not a single good bone in your body." She screamed and hit, like a woman possessed. Wendy was stunned by the blows, clutching her face and crying hysterically. "Mom, are you crazy? Why are you hitting me?" "Hitting you? I ought to kill you." Laura's eyes were bloodshot as she pointed at Wendy's nose and screamed. "You think I don't know? You and your father have been plotting this all along. He secretly transferred 20% of the company's shares to you. You two were planning to kick me, the old hag, to the curb to make room for his mistress and illegitimate son. I'm telling you, not a chance in hell." It turned out that while preparing for the divorce with her lawyer, Laura had discovered that James, without her knowledge, had gifted his largest asset, a 20% stake in the Sullivan Group, to Wendy. That stake was their joint marital property. James's action was a blatant transfer of assets. Laura was completely enraged. She was convinced that Wendy and James were in it together, that this father-daughter duo had been planning to dump her for a long time. Wendy was completely dumbfounded. "I don't know, I really don't know anything about any shares," she cried, trying to explain. But Laura was no longer listening. She attacked Wendy like a madwoman, hitting and cursing. And then somehow, James arrived on the scene as well. When he saw the chaotic scene, he almost had a stroke from the anger. "Laura, you crazy woman. Stop it," he yelled, rushing forward to pull Laura away. Seeing him only added fuel to the fire. She let go of Wendy and lunged at James, scratching deep, bloody marks on his face with her nails. "James Sullivan, you bastard. You dare to keep a mistress. You dare to transfer our assets. I'll kill you." In an instant, the stables turned into the scene of a full-blown, knockdown drag-out melodrama. James, Laura, and Wendy, the three of them scuffling, cursing each other, a complete and utter disgrace. The stable staff stood around, stunned by the spectacle, and I stood with Ethan, like two spectators at a play, thoroughly enjoying the farce. Ethan handed me a bottle of water and whispered in my ear, "Ms. Lynn, with your directing skills, it's a crime you haven't won an Oscar." I took a sip of water and shrugged. What can I say? The actors are just too committed to their roles. Looking at that family's ugly faces, I felt not a shred of pity. All I felt was an immense sense of satisfaction. The Sullivan family, the place that had once treated me as a tool and trampled my dignity at will. Now it was self-destructing in the most comical and pathetic way possible. And I was the one who had personally pushed the button. The infighting at the Sullivan house was even more intense than I had imagined. Laura filed a lawsuit against James, demanding a divorce and a full division of their assets. She also leaked all the evidence of his extramarital affair and illegitimate son to the media. In an instant, James's carefully crafted image as a good husband and father was shattered beyond repair. As for Wendy, After witnessing her parents' vicious falling out and enduring the beating, her personality underwent a drastic change. She was no longer the delicate little princess but became gloomy and radical. She hated James, she hated Laura even more, and she hated me. She felt like the whole world had wronged her. The Sullivan Group, under this series of blows, was already teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. To save his company, James decided to take a desperate gamble. He announced that he would host a charity auction gala. Ostensibly, it was to raise funds for children in impoverished mountain regions. In reality, he wanted to use the opportunity to show the world that the Sullivan Group hadn't collapsed yet, and to try to attract new investors for one last fight. He even sent a special invitation to me, and to the Lynn group that stood behind me. His intention couldn't be clearer. He wanted to make peace. Or rather, he wanted to use moral blackmail to force me to save him. When Ethan got his invitation, he laughed so hard he nearly fell over. Has James Sullivan run out of ideas? Does he think hosting a charity dinner will whitewash his reputation? I sneered. He's not trying to whitewash himself. He's trying to drag me down with him. If I don't go, he'll brand me as cold-hearted and merciless. If I do go, and I bid on anything, he can announce to the world that the Lynn Group has invested in his company. He'll use that to stabilize his stock price and deceive new investors. Ethan raised an eyebrow. So, are we going or not? We're going. Of course we're going. A cruel smirk played on my lips. How could we miss the final act of such a spectacular tragedy? Besides, I have a special gift to give him, one he'll never forget. The night of the auction gala. My father Richard, my mother Claire, Ethan, and I all attended together. Our family's appearance instantly became the focus of the entire event. The moment James saw us, he rushed over like a shark that had smelled blood, holding a wine glass. His face was plastered with a fawning smile, a world away from the confident Chairman Sullivan I once knew. Chairman Lynn, Mrs. Lynn, Mr. Cole, and Zoe. When he saw me, his expression was complicated, a mix of flattery, fear, and a poorly hidden trace of venom. Welcome, welcome. Your presence truly honors us. My father didn't even give him a proper look, just a faint before escorting my mother to the head table. His powerful aura and undisguised contempt left James's smile frozen on his face like a cheap mask. He stood there awkwardly, not knowing whether to stay or go. Just then Laura and Wendy arrived. They were there to crash the party. Laura was dressed all in black, like a widow attending a funeral. Wendy wore heavy, dark makeup, her eyes sullen, looking like a ghost. The mother-daughter pair marched straight toward James the moment they entered. James Sullivan. You still have the nerve to host some banquet? When are you going to pay me the money you owe me? Laura shrieked. Wendy just looked at him coldly. Dad, your company is about to go bankrupt, and you're still pretending to be some great philanthropist? Isn't it ridiculous? James was shaking with rage, but didn't dare explode. He could only hiss in a low voice, You two lunatics. If you want to cause a scene, get out and do it. Don't embarrass me here. Embarrass you? Laura sneered. After all the shameful things you've done, you're still afraid of being embarrassed? Just as a huge fight was about to break out, I gently tapped my wine glass. The crisp sound drew everyone's attention. I stood up and looked at the flustered host on the stage with a smile. Can the auction begin now? My voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that couldn't be questioned. The host, as if granted a pardon, quickly announced the start of the auction. The first few items were unremarkable, until the final, headline item was brought out. It was a piece of land. The very same plot of land for James's great hope, the City of the Future project. With the project stalled and his funds depleted, he was forced to auction off the land to solve his urgent financial crisis. The starting bid, $5 billion. The price shocked the entire room. No one dared to take on this mess. The situation became incredibly awkward. James stood by the stage, his palms sweating, his face pale. Just as he was about to lose all hope, I raised my paddle. $10 billion. The whole room was stunned. Everyone looked at me as if I were a fool. James was so moved he had tears in his eyes. He thought I had finally softened, that I was going to save him. He shot me a look of immense gratitude. I returned it with a brilliant smile. Then Ethan also raised his paddle. $11 billion. I continued to bid. $15 billion. Ethan, 16 billion. Ethan and I, like two bickering children, crazily drove up the price. The price was soon pushed to an unbelievable height, 30 billion. When Ethan called out that price, the entire audience was numb. James was so excited he was about to pass out. 30 billion. That money wouldn't just solve all his crises, it would let him make a huge profit. He felt like his life was about to make a spectacular comeback. I looked at his smug, triumphant face, smiled, and lowered my paddle. I fold. Bang. The auctioneer's gavel fell. Congratulations to Mr. Cole for winning the City of the Future plot for 30 billion. A sparse round of applause trickled through the hall. James rushed excitedly toward Ethan, wanting to shake his hand. Mr. Cole. Thank you so much. From now on, we'll be the best of partners. Ethan looked at him like he was an idiot. He pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses and said slowly, Chairman Sullivan, you seem to have misunderstood something. I'm not the buyer. I'm the seller. The smile on James's face instantly froze. What do you mean? Ethan smiled, a cruel and elegant expression. It means that this piece of land was acquired by a company under my control through debt settlement half a month ago. So, Chairman Sullivan, congratulations. You just spent 30 billion to buy back your own worthless piece of land from me. And by the way, you also helped me drive the price up to the ceiling. Boom. It was as if an atomic bomb had gone off in James Sullivan's brain, leaving it completely blank. He spent 30 billion to buy his own land? He'd been played. He'd been played by Zoe and Ethan working together. A mouthful of blood sprayed from his mouth. He pointed at us, his eyes bulging like bells, and then, stiff as a board, he fell backward. The hall erupted into chaos. And I just watched his falling figure, my face completely calm. It's not over yet. James, you haven't received my final gift yet. I took out my phone and pressed the last send button. The large screen in the banquet hall lit up again. This time, it wasn't displaying any trade secrets. It was a piece of old, but high-definition restored security footage. The footage showed the Sullivan family's garage from 20 years ago. A young girl, only 7 or 8 years old, was furtively cutting the brake line of a car. And that girl was Wendy. That car was the one that James and Laura were about to drive. The one that crashed due to brake failure. It was because of that car accident that they missed their appointment to adopt me from the orphanage, leading to the subsequent mix-up. No. Looking at it now, it wasn't a mix-up at all. It was a deliberate, premeditated plot. Wendy wanted to replace me 20 years ago. She was the real, vicious knockoff. The security footage on the big screen was like the sharpest sword, piercing through the Sullivan family's last shred of decency. Everyone was stunned. Wendy looked at the small version of herself on the screen, the blood draining from her face. She looked like her soul had been ripped out as she collapsed to the floor. No, it wasn't me, she mumbled, her eyes vacant, looking completely deranged. Laura was even more devastated, as if struck by lightning. She pointed at the screen in disbelief, then at Wendy on the floor, her lips trembling, unable to say a word. She had always believed that the car accident was just that, an accident. She had always believed that finding her biological daughter was a gift from heaven to compensate her. She never imagined that the whole thing, from beginning to end, was a plot orchestrated by her most beloved biological daughter. Her years of so-called happily ever after were nothing but a colossal joke. And James, who had just been revived by paramedics, saw the footage, and the rage sent blood rushing to his head again. His eyes rolled back, and he passed out completely. This time, he probably wouldn't be waking up. The gala devolved into a complete farce and tragedy. The sirens of police cars and ambulances echoed throughout the hotel. Wendy was arrested on the spot for suspicion of aggravated assault. Laura, unable to withstand the shock, had a mental breakdown and was sent to a psychiatric hospital. James suffered a stroke that left him paralyzed. He would spend the rest of his life in a hospital bed. The Sullivan family, once a prominent and celebrated name in the city, was utterly destroyed overnight in the most brutal and disgraceful way possible. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. The next day, the Sullivan Group declared bankruptcy and went into liquidation. The friends and relatives who had once swarmed around the Sullivans disappeared faster than anyone. The world suddenly seemed quiet. I stood on the balcony of the Lynn family estate, looking at the distant sky, my heart calm and still. My revenge was complete, but I didn't feel the ecstatic joy I had imagined. Instead, I felt a little empty. A warm embrace enveloped me from behind. It was my mom, Claire. "Zoe, it's all over," she said, gently patting my back, her voice soft. "From now on, don't think about those unhappy people and things anymore. You have us, you have a family that loves you." I nodded, leaning into her embrace, feeling the maternal love that had been delayed for 20 years, but was still just as warm. My dad, Richard, also walked over, holding a file. "Zoe, that kid Ethan Cole has already cleaned up the Sullivan Group's mess. He asked me to give this to you." I took the file and opened it. It was a full report of the Sullivan Group's assets after bankruptcy liquidation. Ethan had acquired all of the Sullivan Group's valuable assets at an extremely low price, and then, he transferred all of them into my name. At the end of the file, there was a sticky note. On it was Ethan's flamboyant handwriting. "Ms. Lynn, this is my bride price to you. Marry me and it's all yours. If you don't marry me, it's still all yours." I looked at the note and couldn't help but laugh out loud. This man was just so charmingly domineering. "Dad, Mom." I looked up at them. "I think I've found the person I want to watch the world's comedies with for the rest of my life." My parents exchanged a glance, their faces breaking into relieved smiles. "As long as you like him, we support you," Richard said. "I've looked into the Cole kid. His background is clean, he's exceptionally capable, and he's truly devoted to you. He's worthy of a daughter of the Lynn family." My mom took my hand excitedly. "So when do we plan the engagement? I want to throw you the most magnificent engagement party the world has ever seen." I was speechless. "Mom, could your action plan maybe slow down just a tiny bit?" In the end, my mom did indeed plan my engagement party with Ethan. The scale was so grand, the guests so distinguished, that it seemed like every top socialite from around the globe had been invited. At the party, I wore a gown personally designed by my mother, adorned with 9,999 diamonds, and accepted everyone's blessings with Ethan on my arm. My dad and grandpa stood guard on one side like two sentinels, scrutinizing everyone who came to talk to Ethan with a critical eye, afraid he might be snatched away by some wildflower. Watching this lively and warm scene, I thought that life, it seems, is quite interesting after all. Halfway through the party, the arrival of an uninvited guest caused a small commotion. It was Wendy. Somehow, she had escaped from the detention center. She was rail-thin, her eyes filled with a crazed and venomous look, like a demon that had crawled out of hell. She was holding a fruit knife. "Zoe," she shrieked, lunging at me. "If I can't be happy, you won't be either. I'm going to kill you. We'll die together." The guests scattered in terror. My bodyguards instantly formed a shield around me. Ethan pulled me into his arms without a second thought, using his own body to block me from her. I looked at the deranged Wendy, but my heart was completely calm. I peeked out from Ethan's embrace, looked at her, and spoke coolly. "Wendy, do you really think you stole 20 years of my life?" She froze, stopping in her tracks, staring at me wildly. I shook my head, a look of pity on my face. "You're wrong. You didn't steal it from me. You took it. You took the 20 years that should have been mine, in the most despicable, most shameful way possible. You thought you had won, but in reality, from the moment you cut that break line, you had already lost. Because your life, from that moment on, was built on lies and sin. It's like a sandcastle on the beach, beautiful to look at, but the moment a wave comes, it collapses instantly. And as for me," I paused, looking around at my family and my love, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "All I lost was 20 years of time. But what I have is a family that will never betray me, a bright and honest future, and a clear conscience. Look at you now, abandoned by everyone with nothing. Now look at me. When do you tell me, who really stole whose life?" My words were like sharp knives, stabbing deep into Wendy's heart. The madness on her face gradually faded, replaced by endless despair and emptiness. She looked at me, at Ethan beside me, and at the family behind me who gazed at me with love and concern. She couldn't hold it together anymore. "Wah!" she cried, dropping the knife, squatting on the floor, and sobbing uncontrollably. Her cries were shrill and desperate. Soon, the police arrived and took her away. Awaiting her was the full punishment of the law and a long prison sentence. The farce had finally, completely ended. I watched her being led away, and there was no longer any hatred in my heart, only a profound sense of melancholy. Ethan squeezed my hand and asked in a low voice, "Are you okay?" I shook my head and smiled at him. "I'm fine. I just feel a little bored." He raised an eyebrow. "Bored? Then shall we find something more interesting to do?" "Like what?" He leaned in close to my ear and said in a captivating voice, "Like, for example, researching how to use a quantum hedge fund to acquire a small African nation?" My eyes lit up. That proposal sounded far more interesting than fighting with the Sullivans. "All right," I said. "But I have one condition." "Name it." "I get to be queen." Ethan paused for a moment, then burst out laughing. He pinched my nose affectionately. "Done. My queen." Many years later, I still sometimes think about the people from the Sullivan family. James lay in the hospital for 2 years before he finally passed away on a quiet morning, with no one by his side. Laura, in the psychiatric hospital, drifted between moments of clarity and confusion. When she was lucid, she would hug a pillow and call out my childhood name. Wendy was sentenced to 20 years for aggravated assault and her various prior offenses. I heard she completely lost her mind in prison, repeating the same phrase every day. "That's not my life." They all paid the price for their actions. And I, after leaving that home filled with calculations and self-interest, began to live a life that was truly my own. I married Ethan. We didn't acquire any African nations. Instead, we established the world's largest charitable foundation, using our wealth and intelligence to help those truly in need. My parents retired completely, and their daily joy consists of traveling the world and nagging us to have children. My grandfather's health is still excellent. He handed over the entire Lynn family business to Ethan and me to manage, while he himself became obsessed with meme battles online. Everything is good. I finally understood that the best revenge isn't to crush your enemies underfoot, ensuring they never recover. It's to live a life 10,000 times better than theirs. It's to stand at a height they can never hope to reach, watch them struggle in the mud, and then, with a breezy indifference, turn and walk away, and completely, thoroughly delete them from your life. That, for them, is the cruelest and most absolute form of contempt. The end.